on delivering social value and changing lives. So I'm EJ Allen and I'm sector manager for the school, so I'll be chairing this morning. In terms of the agenda for today, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping, then we're going to do a quick poll. Then I'm going to hand over to Elliot from Recycling Lives, one of our school partners, which is the main reason why you're all here today. We're going to hear a bit from Elliot about Recycling Lives' approach to social value. And then what we're going to do is talk very briefly about how the school can help, so to signpost you to some of the resources that the school has. Then we're going to open this up to a Q&A. So in terms of housekeeping, so we're expecting quite a few of you today. I think we've got 76 so far. Numbers keep coming in. So because of the sheer number of you, we've muted your microphones and switched off your cameras. However, if you've got questions, please just use the chat on the right-hand side to put those in there. Equally, if you're having any issues with tech, please put questions in there, and Rosie will be able to help. So other than that, please join in with our polling as we go through. We'll share the slides with you afterwards, so again, no need to worry about making notes, and we're also recording this session as well, so we'll send out the recording afterwards, so again you can share that with colleagues. Okay, so could we go to just the poll, please, Rosie? Right, what I'd like you to do, if you scroll down on the screen, just if you can't see on the right hand side using the bar, you'll just see this question there, really simple. What type of organisation are you representing today? So we're just trying to get a feel for who we've got in the audience. So you've got client, main contractor, subcontractor, supplier, social enterprise, FM service provider, consultant or other. Great, the votes are coming in. Okay, so majority seems to be main contractor so far, okay. A few clients, we've got 7 clients. Of subcontractors, so it looks as though the majority of you are main contractors. Okay, that's useful to know. A few consultants and a few other. Okay, thanks, Sophie. Right, so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Elliot.
Thanks, EJ. Morning all, or getting on to afternoon, as EJ says. Good to have all of you joining us. Thanks for taking the time out just to hear about what Recycling Lives are doing when it comes towards social impact. I wanted to use today just to give you an idea of the services that Recycling Lives deliver, but more importantly, how that enables us to deliver social impact through what we do. So I'll briefly touch on the services, but more so focus on the social impact side of Recycling Lives. And then I'll kind of further substantiate that through some real stories of some of the people that we've worked with. So it'll give you a real flavour for how we've taken some contracts which ordinarily a lot of organisations would just use to generate more profit, but I'll talk about how Recycling Lives have used some of these contracts to create opportunities for people that may not be able to get into the workplace, or maybe struggling outside of workplace as well. So there's some stories around some of the charities that we support as well. So just to talk about Recycling Lives in a broad sense, we've been going as a recycling organisation for around 45 years now. Started out in Preston, and over the last few years our turnover has increased significantly. So I joined the organisation in 2015, and at the time it was turnover around 25 million. Over the last 5-6 years, we've grown that turnover to now close to 200 million, but we've also significantly increased the footprint of our sites as well. So we've now got 20 sites across the country, as far down as London, but up to Scotland as well, and in between all 30. So just some of the services that Recycling Lives deliver. We focus on metal and waste recycling. So Each year we produce and export over 500,000 tonnes of export grade ferrous metals, which goes into foundries all over the world and produces new metal at the end of it. We source that through a variety of different streams, so we're one of the largest organisations that process end-of-life vehicles. So currently we're handling around 600 end-of-life vehicles every day, to give you an idea of the scale of what we're doing. So a huge amount of metal and waste generated from the processing of the vehicles. We also deliver total waste management services, so that's where I've largely been involved with the supply chain sustainability skills. So we provide a total waste management service to the construction sector, working with many main contractors. I'd imagine there's probably going to be a few on the call today that we're working with, but we work right through that supply chain as well. So we work with subcontractors and all different organisations involved in the built environment. And finally, we manage compliance services. So we operate a WE producer compliance scheme. So essentially, if anyone's producing electrical items, they have to account for a certain percentage coming off the marketplace. So we offer a service to fulfill obligations around that as well. As I mentioned earlier, the locations that we're operating, it's nationwide now through the sites that we've got. And across all of those sites, we've got a significant amount of investment happening around increasing our recycle rates and improving how we get materials up that waste hierarchy. So over the last few years, we've invested heavily into different technologies, which is meaning that we're moving closer and closer towards that 100% recycle rate for all material passing through our sites. Some examples of that could be up at our site in Preston. We operate a shredder, which essentially processes some of those end-of-life vehicles that I mentioned. But we've continued to invest heavily on all of the downstream parts of that process. So if a vehicle comes into us now, we'll extract all of the metals from it, but we'll also process the waste that's inside it, and that goes through a variety of different stages. And the final stage that we've recently worked on with a local university is producing energy from the waste product at the end of it. So we're looking at how we can have essentially a closed loop solution, because that energy from waste then goes on to powering the shredder. But we take that approach that we've adopted at the site in Preston and apply that to all of our sites that are operating across the country. On top of that, we work with many suppliers across the country, which provide a continuation of our services in the areas that we can't reach. So when we're working with main contractors on skip hire or muck away or whatever it may be, we've got suppliers who can fulfill that service for us, but we expect them to have the same approach towards sustainability as what we do, and we essentially practice what we preach. So as I say, we make those investments into improving our recycle rates and expect our suppliers to be doing the same as well. The organisations that we work with, as I said, it's a variety of organisations. It could be main contractors, as I say, it could be local authorities that we're working with, or householders if they're producing scrap vehicles or if they require a skip, etc. So most importantly, the reason why I'd imagine most people have joined today is to understand how we use some of those services that we're delivering to deliver social impacts to some of the people that work within Recycling Lives. So there's a few different ways which we deliver social impact, and today I'm going to focus largely just on 3 of those. So we operate, the Recycling Lives charity operates within prisons, so we reduce reoffending through offender rehabilitation programs. So we work in 11 prisons at the moment and have one of the most successful offender rehabilitation programs in the country. So it's less than 4% of the people which work through that program go on to reoffend. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We tackle homelessness. So we operate a residential centre which supports up to 10 men at a time. And that's a long-term program in which they can use that term to get back on the feet, get back into employment, get the skills that they need, and ensure that they don't fall back into the same position again. And thirdly, we tackle food poverty. So we work in conjunction with a national charity called Fairshare, which I'd imagine most people have heard of, given the news over the last year or so with Marcus Rashford that's been involved in Fairshare. So we redistribute surplus food that comes into us, and that goes back out to a number of charities as well. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those, but I'm going to relate them back to certain contracts that we've secured, so you can get a real idea for how we can use commercial activities to deliver social impact for our programs. Collectively across all of those, we've delivered £28 million in social impact. I can go into a little bit more detail on how we calculate that as we talk through as well. So one of the stories that I want to focus on is the story of Yvonne. So Yvonne came through another program which I haven't mentioned. So we also work with Prince's Trust on reform programs, and Yvonne came to Recycling Lives through there. And this was a number of years ago, before we started working in the prisons ourselves. And Yvonne started working on our sites. We saw that she was a great employee, and she was one of the first ladies that we've been able to employ coming through one of those sorts of programs. So Yvonne stayed with us for a period of time just working on our sites, but we saw that she was really capable and had the potential to progress into management positions. And after we'd been working in the prisons for a couple of years, we'd expanded the footprint of the work that we do in the prisons and the locations that we was operating. And previously, we'd just been recycling TVs within the prisons. So at the moment, well, we're struggling to recycle TVs in prisons at the moment due to the lockdown restrictions that are in them. But prior to COVID, we'd recycle 100,000 TVs every month within the prison. So again, it gives you an idea of the scale of what we're doing. But we wanted to start operating within a female prison so that we could provide opportunities to ladies coming through the program as well. And we identified that we wanted to start working over in a HMP style up in Manchester. And we saw that we had the opportunity to take a contract that we had with BT. So we was already processing the end-of-life electrical equipment. So it could be the home hubs, various different pieces of electronics that come through BT. And we said we wanted to put that into HMP style, but we needed someone to go in there and run that workshop. And as I say, Yvonne had been working with us for a number of years. And we wanted Yvonne to be able to go on and progress into that management position. But Yvonne had previously been serving her sentence in HMP style. She'd been in and out of prison on numerous occasions for the different offences. But we saw that through working with us in those early stages, Yvonne had really been able to turn her life around and have some stability there. So we worked with the governor to be able to find an opportunity for Yvonne to go on and go back into the prison and run that workshop. We thought there'd be no better role model for the ladies which are working through that programme than someone who's been there and done it themselves. So we was able to use that contract that we had with BT to put all of the home hubs into HMP style. It created employment for the ladies working through there, and it enabled Yvonne to move into a management position where that she could then act as a mentor and a role model to the ladies working through it, and you could see the impact that she had and how she'd been able to turn her life around. Yvonne, the impact that she's had clearly has kind of filtered down and passed on to the ladies that have worked through that program, but it's also impacted her family as well. So if we go back to when Yvonne was working through the prison system herself, her family also found that they were in a similar position. So what you tend to find is if ladies go into prison, then the children are often quite badly impacted as well. So Yvonne's children had ended up going through the same course of action that Yvonne had been going through as well, and ended up getting involved in various different criminal activities. But through seeing Yvonne turn her life around, they'd also taken that as inspiration, and they've turned their life around since. So Yvonne's a great example of how someone can come through one of our programs and then really use that as an opportunity to not only turn their own life around, but to help so many other people through that as well. So the second story I want to talk about was Mark. As I mentioned, we work with a number of main contractors, one of which being Kia. So we work with Kia Highways up in the northwest. And Mark had been in our residential program. So I mentioned that we've got a homeless residential centre where guys are able to come through and spend usually a period of 9 to 12 months where they can use that as an opportunity to get the training that they need. So in Mark's case, that was training to be able to operate on highways, but then also find employment opportunities. So we've got connections with many different employers who are open to working with people coming from different backgrounds. And that's not to say that all people going through these programs are ex-offenders, but it could be someone like Mark who may have formerly been homeless. And in the case of Mark, he was able to get, as I say, his tickets to work on highways, but then we also found employment for him with Kia Highways. And during his time with us, he was able to start getting back into employment, but he really demonstrated how good of an employee he was, and he secured employment after leaving Recycling Lives and progressed into a supervisory position over at Kia as well during his time there. So again, Mark's a great example of how someone can come in from actually being street homeless to progressing, getting back into employment, getting back on their own 2 feet and really turning life around. That was enabled through the relationship with Kia. So again, the more employers that we have working with Recycling Lives, the greater a chance it gives us to be able to find work opportunities in the sectors that the people we're working with want to find themselves working in. Thirdly, I'll talk about Evie. So again, Evie came through another program. So we work with the local job centre to find employment opportunities for people who have previously been struggling to get into employment. And in the case of Evie, she had a number of part-time jobs, but she was finding it very difficult to get the source of income that she needed to support her family. She had 2 children. So Evie came to us through a work program through the job centre, and she was able to find full-time employment with us, which meant that she didn't have to rely on part-time jobs with uncertainty around what hours she was working. But we saw with Evie that she was able to progress into a driving position. So we supported Evie through our driver training program to get a HGV license, and she's since gone to operate HGVs, which has seen a significant increase in her pay as well, which gives her the income that she needs to support her family. That was enabled through the contract that we had with John Lewis, because it created more employment opportunities at our site. So with John Lewis, we process the cardboard and plastics that come from their stores, whether as Waitrose John Lewis. And that acts as an enabler to find more employment opportunities for people who find themselves in similar positions to Evie. And then once they come to Recycling Lives, they can then be kind of redirected into the different routes that they want to choose, whether it's going into a driver training program or progressing into management and so on. It really acts as an enabler to find more opportunities for the people that we're working with. Finally, just wanted to talk about the work that the Food Redistribution Centre does. So we've been working in conjunction with Thurshire for a number of years now, and the model of Thurshire is to essentially redirect food which is surplus to requirements. So it could be that supermarkets overorder food just to ensure that they've got enough stock on the shelves, or it could be that importers bring in too much food because they may as well fill the containers when they're selling produce. Or it could be that the branding is off on packaging. It could have been printed at the wrong angle, for instance, or it could be that Easter had passed not so long ago and all of the stock on the shelves had bunnies and daffodils on it, etc. What you find is the retailers no longer want products like that on the shelves, so that's where Thurshire stepped in, and they use that to bring in food into centres like ours, which we then work with around 240 charities across the Northwest, where we can then send the food back out to them, which enables them to reduce their costs on food, which, you know, the example on the screen here is Pendleside Hospice. You're not going to associate a hospice as being there to provide food to people, but it's just something that they have to do as part of the everyday activities. So Pendleside Hospice, as you can see, that they've been able to reduce the cost on food, which means that they can redirect that onto delivering more in the way of patient care. So there's 240 other stories like that of other charities that we work with which have been able to do similar things. So it's delivering a real positive impact to the charities that we're supporting, which means that they can then go on and deliver more impact through what they do as well. And as you can guess, over the last year, this service has been needed more than ever. So in a normal year, if I go back a few slides, you could see that the amount of meals that we redistribute is around 1 million meals a year. But if you look back over the last 12 months, the amount of meals that have been redistributed is more like 3 million. And that's simply because there's more food banks that need access to food. There's more people going through kids' breakfast clubs, which find that they need access to that food as well. A whole host of different people in different circumstances out there that have found themselves struggling and needing access to services such as this. So whilst it's great that we've been able to support people in that position through this period, it's also a shame that people are finding themselves in those situations. So happy that we can help, but I guess it's more so going back to tackling the cause of those issues, which comes back to some of the other programs that we run, which is about ensuring that people get back into employment, etc., so that they don't find themselves in those sorts of positions. So hopefully that gave you an idea of some of the initiatives that Recycling Lives operate, and how we have used some contracts with various different organisations to deliver social impact through what we do. There's many ways that you can interact with Recycling Lives. It could be reaching out to us as an employer to take some people coming on through our prison programme or through the residential programme. You could interact with us from a waste perspective. So if you have a waste requirement, Recycling Lives offer the total waste management service across the country. By interacting with us on that front, it enables us to create more opportunities like the ones I've discussed. Or it could be that you may wish to provide a donation to the charity, whether it be in time to the Food Redistribution Centre, or working with the people that we're supporting, or in cash to support the charity and delivering more of its programmes. So thanks for listening. thanks to the Supply Chain Sustainability School for inviting me to speak. Hopefully it's given everyone a good idea of how they can be doing something similar to what Recycling Lives have achieved.
Thank you, Elliot. You always do such a fantastic job of bringing social value to life, and so importantly focusing on those outcomes, those real improvements to quality of life, thinking back to Yvonne and the other case studies you talked about. And I can see that the feedback that's coming in is great to hear those positive outcomes. So for everybody, I'm sure many of you've got lots of questions. If you can please put them in the chat, and in a couple of minutes we can do some Q&A. Before we do though, very briefly, just want to kind of remind you of some of the resources available through the Supply Chain School that can help you on the social value agenda. As you know, the school is completely free, so you can access a whole bank of resources on social value. This is just a quick snapshot of some of those that I'd like to kind of bring to your attention. So following on the theme of working with prisons, on the left-hand side there, that's a case study. It's a fantastic example. I think it's Balfour Beatty Economy working with HMP Foston Hall up in Derbyshire. And that's a project looking at decommissioning street lamps and how it's delivered over £34,000 worth of social value. And that one's really interesting in that, similar to the ones we've heard about today, it links in social value to the circular economy and energy and carbon side of things. The top in the middle there, we've got social value in the built environment, and that's an industry update that the school actually published, I think it was last year. And what we did was we went out to all our school partners, I think we've got 126 now, and we asked them what's their approach to social value, what does it mean to them, and most importantly, how are they measuring and monitoring social value, and to try and capture some case studies. So that will give you a really good example of what your peers or potential customers are doing. Then we've got a couple of video case studies there, reading from the start with Vinci, and supporting local people to get into construction. And then on the bottom right there, that's another school publication. That's a wellbeing in the built environment. So that's a framework, again, that the school produced with its partners. I lose track of time. I think that was last year. And here we have on the top left, if we think about the role of designers in delivering social value, that's hugely important. And that document there we worked on a few years ago, worked with Reba, and that's, if, again, any designers out there, I forgot to include that as an option earlier on, but that's a great document. In the top in the middle there, we've got a couple of videos reminding you that the social value agenda, it's not just those typical social issues we tend to think of. It's also linked very closely to energy and carbon, air quality, and so on. So there's some sustainability shorts there. We've got the material exchange platform on the top right. That's if you have any projects, if maybe you're a contractor and you're working in a particular area and you have potentially overordered and have excess materials, you can have a look to see if there are any local community projects in your area where you could donate materials to. And then at the bottom there, we've got an example of some of the on-demand learning that's available through the school. So these are videos of webinars, sessions similar to today, on topics such as PPN06 on social value monetization, which can be quite mind-boggling. So we've got Alfie talking about the different ways in which you can monetize social value, and also trends in social value as well. Something that launched fairly recently was the learning pathways through the school. So what these are tailored curriculums of activity that you can do, and we've launched two particularly on social value. So you can see there you've got an introductory one on what is it and why is it important, and then we have level 2, which is more into kind of defining and delivering social value. If you want to have a look at those learning pathways, you just go to the school dashboard, and you'll be able to see those there. To give you an idea of what the pathway looks like, you can see here, this is the defining and delivering one. So if you click on the pathway, you enroll in it, you can just see which resources are in there, what type of resource they are, what level they're at, and how much time it requires. When you've completed the pathway, you then get a badge, and that appears on your dashboard, and you can share and download that badge with your customers, potential clients, to show them how you're developing your knowledge of social value within your own business. Okay, so I think it's time for Q&A now. So please keep on posting your questions in the chat there. I have a question first of all for you, for Elliot. How has COVID impacted the delivery of social impact initiatives?
So it depends on which front we're we're looking at. So as I mentioned, the requirement from the Food Redistribution Centre has kind of skyrocketed over the last year. So there's been a lot of focus from the Recycling Lives charity on ensuring that they've got access to more channels to bring in food to the Food Redistribution Centre. So that's been a case of building relationships with more producers. So first year kind of hold the relationship with your big retailers and manufacturers, but equally there's tons of SMEs out there which are producing food which is somewhat surplus to requirements, or even if it's not surplus to requirement, we get donations from a lot of organisations into the centre as well. So we've used it as a chance to build more relationships with bakeries or with other food manufacturers, a whole host of different ones, farms for instance, to ensure that we've got enough range of diverse different types of food coming into the Food Redistribution Centre so that we can provide that to the organisations that we're working with. As for the prisons, it's been challenging. The prisons have been in lockdown for a year, given that they're working in, living in close confines to each other. The impact of COVID has been very much felt within the prisons. So what we've been trying to do to tackle that is going back to one of our earlier models, which is providing employment opportunities for people working through the prison programme on the outside. So we used to process, I mentioned there was around 100,000 TVs that we process each month in the prisons. That stopped straight away once the prisons went on to lockdown, so we had to find other sources to process that. So we took them back to our sites where we could then provide employment opportunities for people on release on temporary licence, where they could then come out of prison, or other people find it difficult to get into employment through this period as well, so that we're still being able to create employment opportunities for the men and women that we're working with.
Okay, thank you. Good question here from Mary Fannin. So are there any opportunities for SMEs to support your initiatives in delivering social value?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd particularly say around employment opportunities. So it's interesting, one of the case studies that you was talking about there was Vinci, who we work quite closely with, clearly not an SME, but within the supply chain there's a number of SMEs. And we've worked with a number of them to find employment opportunities for the men and women that we're working with. So there's a project that they're delivering at the moment, Festival Gardens over in Warrington Way, and through the supply chain we've been able to create a number of opportunities. I think it was with a ground worker in this case. So we don't just focus on working with main contractors, it's the whole supply chain, and that could be, as I say, unemployment opportunities, are working with us on waste management, so that we could look to reduce the amount of waste that the SMEs are producing, and tackle social impact through that route, which wouldn't necessarily be around employment, but more so around delivering better environmental outcomes.
Okay, thank you. Question from John Edwards now. Fantastic values that Recycling Lives has, and it's a question about how do you go about embedding those values through your own supply chain? It's one of those really tricky challenges, isn't it? How do you make sure you're working with the right customers and how the right suppliers, and how do you embed those values?
I was reading through the questions actually, and I was hoping this would be one that we'd be able to tackle early on, because it's going to probably answer quite a few other questions that are there as well. So I mentioned when we're delivering waste management services, we outsource part of that. So we essentially operate on a subcontracted model in some areas, albeit we've got our own sites in others. And the suppliers that we work with, the other waste management organisations, what I haven't talked about is some of the other programmes that we do in prisons. So in 2 prisons that we operate in, we fabricate skips, which we use ourselves as a waste management business, but we produce enough skips that they're available for other waste management organisations. So when we're working with suppliers, we expect them to be working at a minimum standard for health and safety and environmental credentials, etc. But we're looking what they can be doing beyond that when it comes towards social impact. And if they're not doing a great deal, we could say to them, why don't you look at sourcing your skips through Recycling Lives, because they're fabricated within prisons, which enables us to deliver more impact. And as we start building that, it creates more opportunities within prisons, which is around fabrication, which great great tool for people to have to find employment upon release. So that's one of the ways. Secondly, again, it's that employment piece. So in the prisons, we work with 250, 300 people serving the sentence at any one point. They're looking for employment all over the country just because they're serving the sentence in one area. So around the corner from me is HMP Kirkham, which we operate in. There might be someone serving the sentence there, but they may be being released to Birmingham or wherever. It's just that they're serving the sentence in that location. They could be going back to somewhere else upon release, which we'll support them to do. But what we tend to find is they've been given the opportunity to find employment within the recycling sector, because in most of the prisons that we work in, we're recycling some sort of material. So they find that they like working in recycling, and then they might want to find a job in recycling upon release. So then we'd go to our supply chain and say, we've got Elliot being released from HMP Kirkham, he's looking for a job in Birmingham, and then we'd look to find an employment through there as well. So there's a few different routes that we try and embed social impact through our suppliers. And then equally, ourselves, when we're buying services, we look to bring in suppliers who could be social enterprises or charities, various different organisations that were delivering that social impact ourselves, but bringing them in as suppliers towards which we could then extend that as a service to our customers. So it's kind of bringing the whole piece together. Brilliant,
thank you. That's a really good overview. You're making it quite easy for me today, attendees, and the questions seem to appear in perfect order. So we've got a question here from Beth that you talked earlier on about the figure. I think it was 28 million of social value, and we've had a few questions about how do you measure, what are you using in terms of calculating that figure?
Yeah, so we obviously capture everyone who's worked through one of our programs, so we can say how many people have worked through over a certain period of time. We then use that and look at government statistics around the cost of reoffending, which we take a few different metrics around that. But we've calculated that the cost to society of someone going on to reoffend is around £100,000 per participant per year on average. That's kind of a low-balled case. So really you could say that someone like Yvonne, for instance, she's come out of prison and she's delivered a whole heap of social impact behind that as well, through her children not going on to commit crimes and for helping more people. But we say as the minimum it's £100,000 per participant per year, which comes from, as I say, government statistics in the Green Book. And then we apply that to how many people we've worked with, and then that contributes partly towards that figure. Then when we look at food distribution, Fairshire have a whole host of metrics that they produce themselves. We're the delivery partner of Fairshire, so we're able to access the figures that they look at, which is around providing a nourishing meal, how much social impact that delivers. So again, we calculate how many tons of food have been sent through the food redistribution centre, and that can then equate to how many meals have been served and how much social impact is then delivered beyond that. And finally, the work in the residential centre, it purely looks at it from a tax perspective. So if someone was previously on the street, so it's costing the taxpayer X amount, and then they've gone on to find a job which is then contributing X amount as well. But I guess the principle is we look at it on quite basic terms, so we're not over calculating how much social impact we're delivering, and we can be very confident in the figures that we're sharing.
Okay, thank you. And for those of you interested in calculating, putting monetary values next to social value, there are a range of different kind of calculators and tools out there. And that webinar that I talked about earlier on, that sits within the school library, will give you a good feel for some of the different ways other organisations measure and report social value.
Yeah, so as I said, we've done it ourselves, but there's loads of different tools out there which I'm sure the supply chain sustainability school are able to direct people to. It is quite difficult to do it yourself. So equally, we're looking ourselves at the moment how we can be partnering with some other organisations to look at more of what we're doing. Because when I've been talking through the different examples of some of the people I've worked with here, you can see that it's not just free programs that we run. There's a whole heap of different initiatives sitting behind them, which we don't currently capture the social impact for. So when we're saying that 28 million, you can see it is really lowballed, because there's tons of other stuff that happens behind that without even considering the environmental impact, which has some social impact tied to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so a question here. So for those of you who are potentially thinking, gosh, you know, social value, such a broad topic, and there's so much that we could be doing, but where on earth do we start? So we've got a question from Steve of how would you recommend you start with a social value initiative? So almost kind of back to basics. And, you know, let's say you're a business and you're thinking we should do something, but what do we do? Where do we start? What would your tips be?
Yeah, I'd probably say look to engage with organisations that are already doing something along these lines. So the thousands and thousands of social enterprises throughout the UK. So if you have a look at Social Enterprise UK, there's a directory of all of the social enterprises out there. And I'd look to see how you could be engaging with them, because there's such a diverse range of services that the social enterprise sector are able to offer, whether it's recycling, such as in the case of Recycling Lives, or whether it's cleaning services, or washroom services, or signage that's needed. There's social enterprises out there to provide pretty much any service that you require, but they'll then use that to deliver social impact through what they're doing. So I'd say the easiest way is to look at your categories of spend, then see how you could be spending that with social enterprises, and then you're going to be delivering social impact simply through procuring products or services. If you wanted to go beyond that, then look at how you could be engaging with some of those social enterprises to provide opportunities for employment for the people that are working through those programs. So again, if you wanted to tackle reoffending because you work in the justice sector, or you've got certain requirements around that, then engage with organisations like Recycling Lives. But if you wanted to tackle getting young people into work, for instance, equally there's going to be tons of social enterprises and charities out there which are able to offer those services as well. So I guess signposting the Social Enterprise UK directory is a good place to start to try and find some of those contacts.
And I think also if you're working in a specific region, and very often local authorities they will clearly have a very good understanding of what the social issues and challenges are within that region, and to try to maybe think about, well, how could we help address and tackle some of those kind of very local issues. Okay, so got a question here that links, I suppose it's from Steve. So from a client point of view, the reporting of the service is as important as the delivery. Have you got any plans to provide more information around the kind of reuse metrics around end of life, so linking into the kind of circular economy principles?
Yeah, so we've got a portal where we capture all of that information. So any material that we handle ourselves or our supply chain handle on our behalf, which, as I said earlier, they're fully audited, so we know what's happening with that material once it goes back to their site. That goes onto our online portal, which gives our clients access to see how much waste they're producing, how much of that waste is being reused, recycled, or how little is going to landfill, so that they're able to circulate that to their clients and give them a better understanding of how much waste they're producing, which we then look to support them with to bring down that amount in tons. So it could be looking at different initiatives for how you could be using pallets. For instance, I'm living on a live building site at the moment, so apologies if there's been any noise in the background, but there's tons of pallets that comes onto site, and there's social enterprises out there which are able to offer a service to reuse those pallets. So we use the data that we collect through the portal to be able to identify opportunities to bring down the amount of waste that's producing, but also identify more around circular economy opportunities, which we can bring to our clients as well.
Brilliant, thank you for that. And then a question from Tom. Tom was keen to know more about, are there any more plans to recycle more materials in the UK? I think you touched earlier on that some waste is processed for shipping abroad for recycling. So just a quick kind of thoughts on that.
I'll try and keep it quick. When I mentioned that we export around 500,000 tonnes of scrap, that's because there isn't currently a market for that material within the UK. There are steel foundries in the UK, but they don't want recycled material. They want virgin material, which goes through those foundries. So, yeah, we'd be all for keeping the material in the UK if there was the infrastructure there to support it. As it stands, there isn't. But equally, there's many different material streams that we're handling. So if we look at what we're doing around plastic recycling, for instance, the work that we do with John Lewis that I talked about earlier, we're looking at how we can have plastic reprocessors in the UK, which may be able to use that material to create one of the latest ones I've been looking at is coat hangers. So how we could use it again to identify more circular economy opportunities, but keep that material within the UK, because as the question is rightly inferring, there's more impact from that material being exported, because you're going to have all of the CO2 that's linked to it from shipping it. So we want to keep that material as local as possible, but it's reliant on the infrastructure that's available within the UK.
Yep, it's not an unfamiliar challenge, is it? It's in sustainability. Okay, I think that's it then for questions. It's just gone 11:45, so that's good on time. So thank you so much, Elliot. That's been fantastic, and we've had loads of really good feedback. I think you've certainly inspired many of our attendees. So I suppose any final comments or thoughts before I close, Elliot, from yourself?
I guess what I would say, there's clearly been a load of questions there on how to deliver social impact through a whole host of different sectors. I'd imagine. I think at the start when we had the poll, it seems like there's a variety of different attendees here. What I would say is just look for some of the easier wins. As I inferred earlier, if you look to procure products and services from the social enterprise sector, then you're going to be able to deliver more social impact. But what you'll often find is that you get in the equivalent product or service, the quality and price, in some cases better, but you're using that as a way to be delivering more social impact. So look for some of the easy wins and then use that kind of as a catalyst to go on and focus more on some of the initiatives that you want to do as an organisation.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Some of you have been asking, oh, you missed the beginning, and will the slides be available? Don't worry, we've recorded the session and we'll be sending out the slides to you all. And I know, Elliot, actually one thing I didn't mention, quite a few people have been saying, have you got depots here? Have you got depots there? So clearly lots of enthusiasm. So when we send out the recording link, we'll send you a link in terms of depots and things like that. Is that okay, Elliot?
Yeah, of course. And please also include my contact details if anyone wants to get in touch, ask more questions, whether it's about recycling lives or just more about delivering social impact. Please do get in touch.
Okay, so before you go, please do complete the feedback. It's really useful to get feedback on what you found useful, how we could improve going forward, because as you know, there's a very full kind of programme of training coming up over the coming months. So thanks everybody, and we'll be sending out the link very soon. Okay, thanks, bye-bye.